My name is Bridget Warner. I'm the site manager here at the Zwaanendael Museum. We are a division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. We're under the Department of State for the state of Delaware. And we're really glad that everybody is joining us today for this presentation. I've heard Tamara do this presentation in the past. I'm sure she's added some new facts and information to it since then. I'm looking forward to hearing it again. I will tell you it's a wonderful presentation. I don't think anybody's going to be disappointed. All right, well, I think we can probably get started. Tamara Burks is a graduate of Delaware State University. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in media studies from the New School for Social Research in New York City. Her background includes service leader for AmeriCorps Safe and Sound, director of Youth Organized Television Education Video Center in New York City, historical researcher, archive keeper for the Federal New York African Burial Ground Project in New York City, and historical interpreter and researcher for Delaware State Museum's Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. And as an aside, I am just going to share a little personal note. Tamara and I go back many, many years when the Visitor Center was part of Historical and Cultural Affairs. And that's when I first met Tamara. And Tamara was a part-time historical interpreter back then and had just moved recently from New York, and she was starting research on the Rosedale Beach project. She has been working on this from about, 2002 to the present day, 2011 to 2020, 2002, she's been researching, so she knows her stuff. And without further ado, I'm going to darken my video and turn it over to Tamara.
Okay, Kalila, need your help. Bear with me for 1 second. All right, greetings again. Greetings again, sorry about that. My name is Tamara Burks, and I would like to sincerely thank you all for joining us today again to remember and share the legacy of the Delaware's former premier cultural institution. Throughout the nation, many historic sites, which are an important part of our international, national, and local heritage, are quickly being lost and forgotten at an alarming rate. And I am truly honored to be a part of the ongoing process to recognize the rich heritage of one of the most sacred sites, the former Rosedale Beach Hotel and Resort. And we will be actually changing gears a little bit today. And the first part of my presentation will incorporate a little history of Juneteenth, which commemorates the emancipation of enslaved people of color in the US, and how that history would create a climate that would give birth to resorts like Rosedale Beach and other similar resorts. So Juneteenth has often been referred to as the Second American Revolution, Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, or Independence Day. Juneteenth actually stands for June 19th, which was the day in 1865 that a message of freedom from slavery was brought to the state of Texas. So if you're going back to 1863, President Abraham Lincoln completed the final draft of the Emancipation Proclamation that declared that all persons held as enslaved people within the said designated states and parts of states are and henceforth shall be free. But this declaration did not apply to certain states, which I wasn't aware of, such as Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and Kentucky, and Texas. The Delaware State Legislature rejected the initial call, not Texas. The Delaware State Legislature rejected the initial call to ratify the initial Emancipation Proclamation, which was the 13th Amendment. And they stated, when the people of Delaware desire to abolish slavery within their borders, they will do so in their own way. So going forward to 1865, June 19th, was again the day that a message of freedom from slavery was brought to Galveston, Texas. And it was just a message because it was not the end of slavery for the people of Texas and many other states, including Delaware. Many owners of enslaved persons refused to comply with the call to end slavery, and they wanted to hold on to the system of slavery for as long as they could or until they were forced to. Even though Juneteenth did not mean freedom for enslaved people in Delaware, it was the start of a long journey toward freedom. In 1868, the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution was also rejected by the Delaware State Legislature, which would grant citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including former enslaved people, and guaranteed all citizens equal protection under the law. States that ratified the 14th Amendment in the 20th century were Delaware, 1901, Maryland, 1959, California, 1959, Kentucky, 1976, and Ohio, September 17, 2003. So in 1870, the 15th Amendment to the US Constitution was rejected by Delaware and other states, which extended civil rights and voting rights to people of color, including formerly enslaved persons. States that did not ratify the 15th Amendment until the 20th century were Delaware, 1901, Oregon, 1959, California, 1962, Maryland, 1973, Kentucky, 1976, and Tennessee, 1997, believe it or not. So 1901, finally, Delaware ratified the 13th Amendment, followed by Kentucky in 1976, and Mississippi in 1995. They did not ratify the 13th Amendment ending slavery until 1995, and it wasn't certified until 2013. So more than 30 years after the nation, Delaware was the first to ratify the Constitution, but was among the last to ratify the Emancipation Proclamation. And this history set the stage for our Rosedale Beach story and gives us a little background information about the climate under which this great cultural institution was born and flourished. So this is me when I was a little girl, and my dad, Leroy Jubilee, and my father grew up in Millsboro, Delaware. Many years ago, he would share some information with me that was vitally important, not just to him or to me, but was important for the nation and possibly the whole world. So my dad and I grew up in two different worlds. And I began attending school here in Kent County, Delaware in the 1970s. Some of my teachers were people of color, some weren't. I went to the YMCA to swim. I went to the roller rink on Friday nights and Saturday nights or whenever I could. I also attended an integrated church, which had a little singing group. This is me and my little singing group. And I ate at Denny's or wherever my family chose to eat. I went swimming at Silver Lake in Dover, Delaware, whenever I could. And so then on a weekend trip, my father and I were driving along the Bay Bridge into the state of Maryland, and my father started telling me about the story of Rosedale Beach. There were no earphones, iPods, cell phones, etc. So I could not tune him out, and he had my full attention. He told me that people of color had their own beaches and resorts where they could go swimming and have picnics. He also told me about a place in Millsboro, Delaware called Rosedale Beach, where famous entertainers would perform. And I had been to Millsboro many times, but I just could not believe that a place like that could have existed, in Delaware. But I never forgot those stories. And so many years later, I was working on a music history project, and I began to look further into the history of Rosedale Beach. I began interviewing my dad. And because many of our interviews took place in restaurants, many of my original notes were written on dinner napkins. Between the early 1800s and 1900s, the Rosedale Beach Resort was once referred to as Harmon's Park and was owned by Isaac and Sarah Harmon. And the Harmons were members of the Nanticoke community in Millsboro. Harmon's Park was a gathering place for amusements and leisure. The park was used for a variety of activities, including bathing, playing baseball, and for religious meetings. Sorry, I need to go back there. And one of the things I want to tell you about Isaac Harmon, he was he had a very successful crabbing business. He owned part of the pier and he exported many types of seafood products. And he could be described as a banker of sorts. So he made loans available to people of all backgrounds and all walks of life. 1935 was a time of stark contrast. We were experiencing an ailing economy in every corner of America, but at the same time, people wanted to have a good time. So in 1935, live entertainment became a luxury after the stock market crash. 20% of all Americans were on public assistance, which included 50% of people of color in northern cities. In the South, the ailing economy caused several farmers and agriculture workers of color to lose their incomes, causing widespread homelessness. But this was also the time when the music of people of color began to take on an urban identity and an era of professionalism. So here we get to the Great Depression era, and you'll see, it didn't matter who you were or what your background was. Everybody was experiencing the same thing all over the nation. And people wanted to have a good time. So it was also 1930s was a hot jazz time. This is leading up to when Rosedale Beach, was open as a resort. So people were experiencing financial difficulties, but they still wanted to go out and enjoy themselves. And it was like a Black music renaissance of sorts. Now I'm going to take you to the early 1930s in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, where our story of Rosedale Beach really begins. So between 1932 and 1934, there was what was called a school fight, where at one point, children of all backgrounds were attending school together in this town, and there was a decision made to segregate the schools by race. Also at this time, there was only one business owned by people of color in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, and that was a print shop. So in 1935, Jesse and Geoffrey Voss went on vacation and traveled to Rosedale Beach in Millsboro, Delaware, from Berwyn, Pennsylvania. And apparently the Vosses were people of distinction, as this notice appeared in the regional newspaper in July of 1935. So in 1937, Jeffrey and Geoffrey Voss purchased a parcel of land by deed in Millsboro, Delaware, from Theophilus Miller Hopkins and her husband, Ernest Hopkins, April 3rd, 1937. So this blue arrow actually points to where the hotel was located, actually facing a street that was going out of the hotel to the right there. And then the Indian River would have been to the left of the hotel. So Rosedale Beach, Inc. was officially incorporated in the state of Delaware on April 14, 1937. So it was an actual corporation here by Jesse W. Voss of Berwyn, Pennsylvania, Floyd Voss, his brother, his wife, Geoffrey May Voss. And they had demolished a 5-room hotel located that was already there. So there was already a hotel there. So Rosedale Beach did not just start in 1937. It was already a resort there, but he just sort of made it into a corporate environment, bringing entertainers in and all that. So in 1946, sorry, I gotta go back. In 1946, Jesse Voss built a new Rosedale Beach Hotel, which had 32 rooms. In 1955, Rosedale Beach, Inc. was described as a summer resort in the documents, the historic documents that we found, with a hotel, a restaurant, and a bar. The board of directors included Dorsey Johnson, Warren Jackson of Millsboro, H.C. Harry Burton of Lewis. The officers of Rosedale Beach at the time included President Benjamin B. Campbell of Millsboro, Vice President Treasurer Jesse Voss, and Secretary Floyd Voss. So the vision for Rosedale Beach Hotel was truly amazing. I mean, the Voss family had an awesome vision of what they wanted to see there. So along with the hotel, the resort once featured from time to time a boardwalk, dance hall, picnic area, beachfront area, campground with cottages, amusement park, baseball diamond. And some of the resort's other intended purposes included a hall for assemblies. They wanted to have lectures, musical programs, literary, social, and other entertainments. The Vosses wanted to present scientific and other types of exhibits, sort of a museum of sorts, and parts of the building were intended to be used as a library, a restaurant, and a cafe business. So this information was actually extracted from the official corporation documents found, the Division of Corporations on Rosedale Beach, Inc. So I was just truly stunned to see their great vision of what they wanted to see for the people of Delaware and well beyond Delaware. So this is an early image. Very few images of the hotel exist. I mean, or they do exist, we just don't have access to them. But this is an early, on the right side, you see one of the vehicles or truck for the hotel. So when you see these types of images, you know it was there, people visited, but when you're trying to research and find images, very, very difficult. So because there were very few places for people of color to go for entertainment and hotel accommodations, many people traveled to Rosedale Beach from points north, south, west, all along the East Coast. Church groups came, college students came, family groups, individuals would come to a little enclave like Millsboro to see some of the best entertainment anywhere at the time. So if college students were coming here, this was their Fort Lauderdale coming down to Rosedale Beach. So then and now, this is an early an article about hot times at Rosedale Beach, and you see the little area where bands used to play out on the water. So, and on the right is a more the recent picture of the same area that includes a boat ramp there. And basically, people of all backgrounds would enjoy the music because they would, drive along or ride along in their boat and just sit out there and enjoy the music. And I mean, I think that was the idea for Mr. Voss, because he was a person of, he came from an area where people of all backgrounds were going to school together. So he built it for everybody. And they had baseball games. And my dad was telling me about some of the baseball players would have been, national players that played there, but because, of the color of their skin, they weren't able to go any further. But in the 1940s, there was a place for baseball games at Rosedale Beach. Local teams would play and crowds of people would come to watch the game. Church groups would come to Rosedale Beach for Sunday picnics. Buses from larger cities in the surrounding area would arrive at the resort, and it became the hangout, for the college students, like I said earlier, who came to Rosedale Beach to participate in special activities. Rosedale Beach, was their Fort Lauderdale. And this is an original Rosedale Beach resort advertisement that I was actually given a copy of from the grandson of the Vosses, Bobby Walls, and his brother Albert Walls. He was very instrumental in letting me take a picture of this. And if you look at it, it has their names on it. They advertise they had daily buses coming in from Philadelphia. So you got 13th and Filbert Street, 69th Street Terminal. I mean, they were serious. They were serious businessmen, They were interested in getting people from all areas. So they had cottages, cabins, hotel rooms, so you could rent it for the week. You could do it overnight, I mean, it was just amazing. And it says, make your reservations early because it was a busy place. And they also offered meals as well. And this is just a little advertisement, just kind of give you an idea of some of the groups that were there. Some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not. Thomas Fast Waller, and all these artists, I've heard, their music, amazing, amazing international stars, many of them. Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, James Brown, Calloway, Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, Ella Fitzgerald, Stevie Wonder, Jackie Wilson. So these are just some images. This is Thomas Fats Waller, early ragtime artist, and Duke Ellington, you're all familiar with him. But the interesting thing about them now coming to Rosedale Beach was that now the performers could actually sleep in the same hotel they performed in. Here we got Louis Armstrong. You got Chick Webb and Ink Spots, performers and their big bands, such as Duke Ellington, we saw before, Count Basie. Chick Webb performed for energetic Rosedale Beach crowds, as well as Fats Waller and the Ink Spots. And this really got me when I found this advertisement about Rosedale Beach in the Billboard magazine. Because, my dad was telling me how amazing this place was. I said, yeah, it sounds like it was amazing. But when I saw this advertisement, I was just super excited. And this is an actual advertisement from the Billboard magazine, the magazine of all for music and all that entertainment. So it says Rosedale Beach famous show of spot of Millsboro, Delaware was inaugurated Saturday night barn dances for the winter for the first time in history. Now under the management of Floyd R. Voss, who represents owner Jesse Voss. The spot is located in good hunting territory. The Billboard magazine, 1946. And this is Lucky Melinder, who would have been another advertisement, came up with his name in it. He would usher in the new season on June 23rd for Floyd Voss at his Rosedale Beach Dancery, they call it, at nearby Millsboro, Delaware. Billboard magazine, 1950. And here's another article that I found. The world famous Lionel Hampton and his orchestra performed at Rosedale Beach on Monday night, July 31st, 1944. Lionel Hampton. Ella Fitzgerald performed there, and she entertained the troops. And many guests would come and rent the little private cottages for 2 rooms. And this was during the World War II era. So coming home from the war, it would have been very nice to be able to go see Ella Fitzgerald perform, at the hotel there. Now this one, I just love this picture so much, so I just stuck it in there, her and Marilyn Monroe. And you have Sam Cooke, Fats Domino were performers there. Cap Calloway. Jackie Wilson, Count Basie. Aretha Franklin. Beautiful pictures of her. Of course, Ray Charles and young Stevie Wonder. Now, this is all actually 2021 would have brought in the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Rides, which were bus trips taken by integrated passengers throughout the South in 1961. They were protesting segregated bus terminals. But during this time, Rosedale Beach continued to stay in operation. People were of color were fighting for equality on public transportation, in schools, and in public facilities. Now, this is a story that my dad told me about, one of his stories. He said that one night or one afternoon, James Brown was set to perform at Rosedale Beach to sold out audiences. And then James Brown was a no-show, which is a no-no when you got all these people waiting outside for you. But they found out that he was actually stopped by the Delaware State Police on the highway. as people shouted, "We want James Brown." He came around the corner and the crowd went wild. This is my dad's story. And it was a sold out show. And then you go into the civil rights movement, Rosedale Beach still in operation. And it was a very volatile time. And during the 1960s, you have James Brown, Jackie Wilson, and young Stevie Wonder performing at Rosedale Beach, among many others. Now, the Freedom Rides would have ushered in the end of an era of segregation in public facilities, but also many venues like the one at Rosedale Beach became a thing of the past, which is why now you have to hear about it in a story or from an older person. Now, this is a Rosedale Beach tax report that I found, and I'll give you a little background about how these were found. I was working at Delaware State Museums, or excuse me, at the Division of Corporations, and my job was to study business history for people who wanted to order documents and all. So I wondered, because I went to the archives, nobody had any information about Rosedale Beach. There weren't very many books with Rosedale Beach information, and all I had was the stories from my dad and other people. And then I decided to take a look in the record, and I found the original certificate of incorporation documents, tax report. So this was like we call a smoking gun per se. And I was told by Russ McCabe at the archives, he told me when I went over there to do some research, he said, well, if you can find information about Rosedale Beach, maybe we'll put up a historic marker one day. So they gave me a nice little challenge, But on this document, you see it says State Nature Corporation's Business Summer Resort Hotel. And Harry and Danella Burton were the last owners of the Rosedale Beach Hotel and Resort. So this is from 1954. This is a little timeline about Rosedale Beach. So in 1955, Rosedale Beach, Inc. was described as a summer resort and hotel. Floyd Voss served as secretary. Jesse Voss was president. Warren Jackson, H.C. Harry were board of directors. Dorsey Johnson. In 1961, the lands of the Vosses, which totaled about 9 acres, were sold to board member Harry C. Burton. So it stayed in the family, so to speak. So in the 1970s to the 1980s, 1962, or should I say 1960 to 1980s, the Rosedale Beach boardwalk was destroyed because there was a huge hurricane in the area. In 1963, an agreement was signed with the state of Delaware to allow visitors to park their cars on Rosedale Beach property. 1976, Rosedale Hotel and Bar was still open for business. On Sundays, people came to Rosedale Beach and local bands would play there, for hire. In 1981, an agreement of purchase and sale was made between Rehoboth Development Corporation and owners of Rosedale Beach Hotel. And in 1982, New Rosedale Beach Inc. entered an agreement with the state of Delaware Department of Natural Resources to build a boat ramp. In 1983, an assignment of title and interest was transferred to Gull Point Incorporated, and Gull Point, is now located there. So if you go to Gull Point on Crepe Myrtle Drive in Millsboro, you'll see where the actual hotel was. And to me, it was just a beautiful place. It still is a beautiful area down there. So some of the important areas I wanted to explore in looking at the history of Rosedale Beach, and I wanted to know, why would the Vosses want to come to Millsboro to operate a resort? And I wanted to know, how rare was Rosedale Beach Hotel and Resort in America before the 1960s? So why operate the Rosedale Beach Resort? There were few opportunities in Berwyn at the time. So the Vosses were looking to build something. They caught a dream when they visited Rosedale Beach a few years before and jumped at the chance to follow their dreams. And even in the midst of the Depression era, people still wanted to have a good time. So this is a sample of rare resorts owned by people of color in America before the 1960s. And during my initial research, I wanted to know how rare they were. And they were rare based on the scale under which they operated, bringing in people, entertainment, and publicity from a variety of places. And I wanted to present a sample of rare resorts owned by people of color before 1960. Let's go through here. So we have Bruce's Beach in California, Highland Beach in Maryland, Peg Leg Bates Resort, upstate New York, Lincoln Hills in Colorado. And these are just a few, there are so many. But starting off with Bruce's Beach in the early 1900s to 1927, was open in Southern California in the early 1900s, and entrepreneurs, Charles and Willa Bruce owned it. And actually Willa Bruce owned the resort and Charles helped her in the business. So she was an early female entrepreneur. And Bruce's Beach included an inn called Bruce's Lodge. They had a cafe, a dance hall, and a 2-block private residential community. The patrons were unfortunately racially harassed by the surrounding community, and the beach was taken from the Bruces by the city. But on September 30th of 2021, the land was rightfully returned to the descendants of the Bruces. So you can actually see that if you log on to, just Google it, Bruce's Beach, and you'll see the story of the Bruces. And the area is located in what is now South Venice Beach, which is prime real estate today. And this is an image of Willa and her husband. And these are just some images from Bruce's Beach. This is actually a memorial, so if you go there to the area today, that's what you'll see. Then we have Highland Beach from 1893. Was founded in the Chesapeake, Maryland Bay Area in 1893 after patrons of color had been turned away from the restaurants and at the nearby Bay Bridge Resort. The resort was incorporated in 1922 and was visited by noted individuals such as Paul Robeson, Mary Church Terrell, Booker T. Washington, Alex Haley, Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Paul Laurence Dunbar. So these are just some images from Highland Beach in the early days. Amazing, amazing. And see, I wasn't aware of, that people of color actually went to the beach, because when I first started going to the beach, we didn't actually go on the beach, we just walked on the boardwalk. And then we get to Peg Leg Bates Resort, which operated from about 1951 to 1989. And Peg Leg Bates was a legendary tap dancer whom, despite losing his leg at the age of 12, became a world-renowned, multi-talented entertainer. And Peg Leg Bates and his wife created one of the few resorts and country clubs for people of color in 1951 in Conshohocken in upstate New York. And I've been in that area. It's an amazing, beautiful area in the Catskills area. They converted a large turkey farm in the Catskills Mountains into a resort. It became one of the largest Black-owned and operated resorts in the country. Peg Leg Bates would entertain audiences in the shows he promoted at his own nightclub. He would greet all the guests as they arrived. And the resort featured hundreds of jazz musicians and dancers. So here's an advertisement for Peg Leg Bates, his interracial country club in Conshohocken, New York. So they had a guest house, main house, bungalows, cottages with private baths, swimming pool, lawn games, basketball, baseball, the Knotty Pine bar, and of course the dance floor. And this is an image of the Catskills area. And then we go to Lincoln Hills, which operated from about 1928 to 1964. And it was a summer resort located in Gilpin County, Denver, Colorado, from 1928 to 1964. Was one of a handful of places in America where people of color could rent or purchase a vacation home or cabin. And some of its visitors included Zora Neale Hurston, Lena Horne, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and Langston Hughes. in the resort advertised in Ebony and Jet magazines. And this is an image, early advertisement of Lincoln Hills, and you could see they were trying to put a lot in this advertisement, but it's a lot to do. And these are some pictures from Lincoln Hills. People were having a good time, hanging out. And then this is a more modern resort and spa run by Sheila Johnson, who was a former co-founder of Black Entertainment Television. And she opened her own resort in the 20th century, 21st century, the Salamander Resort and Spa. Okay, so now we're getting into remembering Rosedale Beach. What led up to the Rosedale Beach historic marker? Eventually, in 2001, I had a conversation with Dr. Michael Blakey at the New York African Burial Ground Project where I worked. Before the project was destroyed, it was located at the 6th World Trade Center. And yes, I was working there during that time, and I was able to avoid all the disaster over there. But Dr. Michael Blakey was the scientific director of the project. And he actually grew up in Delaware, and he had an article about the Nanticoke families in Delaware that he had in his archive that I read. And I thought, I think you may know some of my family members, or maybe people from Millsboro, because he actually lived in the area. And I was working on a program for Delaware State Museums. I decided to look for the Rosedale Beach information. I started thinking about it again. And because very little information could be found, and due to budget cuts, I began working at the Delaware Division of Corporations, where I found the original Rosedale Beach Incorporation documents, like I said before. And then between 2009 and 2010, research was completed and presented to the Delaware Public Archives, and the marker was approved. And this is an image of me and my husband, Khalil Shaw, and a friend of ours, and the Twin Towers behind us. We were on a Saturday excursion, looking around for history. And this is Dr. Michael Blakey with the skeletal, I don't know what you call it, in the background. And this is where I actually kind of got, as Bridget said earlier, been working on it for a long time. So I would say maybe 2001, I started thinking about it. My wheels were turning, thinking about, Millsboro, and thinking about Rosedale Beach. I remember the stories Dad was telling me. And this is actually my ID from the U.S. Customs House here at the bottom. And that was 2001. And then once I started working with Delaware State Museums, I was working at the Johnson Victrola Museum. And if you've ever not or heard of, let's see, the Victor Talking Company and Nipper Dog, the famous Nipper Dog, and eventually his company would be sold to RCA. This is Eldridge Reeves Johnson, who was a music mogul in Delaware, or he was from Delaware originally, but he was in Camden, New Jersey. That's where his company was. And he sold his company for $29 million before the stock market crashed. But he recorded a lot of people of color, in his company, and these are just a few. And so as we did our projects and presentations, we were looking for some inspiration for a new program. And that's what got me to start thinking about Rosedale Beach again. And this is me doing a program there at the Johnson Petroleum Museum. Sorry. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. Okay, I'm sorry, I got you. We're okay now. And this is Russ McCabe, the former director of Delaware Public Archives, and he was the one that told me if I could find any information about Rosedale Beach, and just remind you, they didn't have anything at the archives. He said, we can put up a marker. And that was my cue to continue to research. So the steps were doing the research, securing funding, getting permission from the current landowners, the Gold Point community, and then plan the marker unveiling. This was between 2009 and 2011. And I also started to send letters to the members of the Delaware State Legislature, telling them about Rosedale Beach and how it was important part of Delaware history, and we would be interested in maybe putting up a historic marker for it. And this letter went to Representative John Atkins, who was in Southern Delaware representative. And then I sent it to other representatives. This one went to Bradford Bennett here in Dover. And so basically I was just trying to gain support for it, because you couldn't, get the marker up unless you had some backing in the legislature. So in 2011, this is Senator George Bunton, who was very instrumental, along with John Atkins, Representative Atkins, to getting the funding together. This was about 2011. And I actually called Senator Bunting, and he was just an amazing person on the phone. I was able to talk to him about the history, and he said that his mother had stories about going down to Rosedale Beach and enjoying the music. So he was all for it. And he came to the marker ceremony. This is him actually down in Millsboro at the site. Working with Gold Point, this is the community that actually is located in the area that the hotel was. I contacted the Gold Point homeowners, and they were extremely, extremely positive about it. They were very interested in knowing what, the history there. They were all for it. I worked together with Tom Summers at the Public Archives to decide where the marker should and could be placed. But we did have to go through a lot of what we call red tape just to get it put up, because so many different agencies were involved that had to sign off on it. So, it was a process, and we weren't even sure that we could get the marker put up on the actual site. So that was one of the things, but, we just have faith that it would actually go through. And so we planned the marker ceremony. And this is one of the early articles of the state marker in the Delaware newspaper. This is the historic marker proof. So then once we got the funding, we put together a proof, and Tom Summers sent this to me, and I actually wrote the copy on the marker. So we decided, what we should put on it, what was important. And then here's the actual marker, if you haven't been able to see it. On this site was located the Rosedale Beach Hotel and Resort. Hotel and resort operated from the early 1900s to the 1970s. In the pre-integration era of the 20th century, there were very few places for people of color to go for entertainment and hotel accommodations. Because of this, Rosedale Beach was a designated point for many people along the East Coast. Rosedale Beach was officially incorporated on April 14, 1937. And so, of course, the resort once featured a hotel, boardwalk, dance hall, picnic area, beachfront area, and so on. And many of the artists that performed there, you see on the marker. And once Delaware integrated its beaches, hotel, and other public facilities, visitation to Rosedale Beach began to decline. And so the boardwalk was actually destroyed by the storm of 1962 and was never replaced. And then also, although people still visited the resort until the mid-1970s, the Rosedale Beach Hotel and Resort was eventually sold to Gold Point in 1983. So we held a marker dedication ceremony on December 2nd, 2011. And so I was on a hunt to see, who would actually speak at the ceremony, who would do the ceremony. And I wanted to have this marker ceremony and who was going to get to speak. And I tried with no luck to find someone. And finally, one person told me, well, you're going to speak because you have the information. And I was thinking, are you sure you want me to get up there and talk? But yeah, I had to bite the bullet and get up there and speak. So these are just some images from the marker ceremony. And this is me nervously waiting to speak, and my husband, Khalil Shaw. Nice. This is my youngest daughter, Kanisa Shaw. She was reciting her grandfather's story of Rosedale Beach. And this is, again, Senator George Bunting. He was telling some amazing stories. And this is Bill Daisy, who recently passed away, the former chief of the Nanny Cooke. He was one of the first people that I spoke to about getting the marker. And he told me it's going to be a hard fight. We're going to tell you no, because it's difficult sometimes to get some of these things, done. But he gave me a lot of encouragement. He was like a grandfather. He was just an amazing person, and he truly will be missed. This is Bobby Wall's grandson of the former Rosedale Beach owners, as I told you about before. He's the grandson of Jesse and Joffrey Walls. So I found him by finding his brother, Albert Walls, in Ghana. And Albert Walls sent me an email back. He said, "How did you find me in Ghana?" But I was able to find him, through my research. This is Mr. Tom Shannon. He's actually got up during the ceremony. He's a former Delaware State Police trooper. He attended the marker ceremony and told an amazing story about how he was sent down to Rosedale Beach on a raid. But much to his surprise, when he got inside the hotel, he just witnessed people having a good time. So he said, "I sat down and had a good time myself." And this is artist Doris Price, and she was very instrumental in providing the few images that I used in this slide presentation. Also, there's a film that has been completed by the Department of Natural Resources, Delaware State Parks, and they have there's a Rosedale Beach documentary that's been done, and she actually provided images for that as well. So she's Doris Price is an artist and a descendant of some of the owners of Rosedale Beach. As I said, she provided many of the images that I use. Here are some more pictures. And these are my daughters, Kalila and Kanisa Shaw. They're much older now. This was at the ceremony. And this is me and my dad, Leroy Jubilee. He was the little boy who knew about Rosedale Beach, and he had the mindset to talk to a little girl who wasn't interested in history about Rosedale Beach. And it's because of him that this marker is up, because otherwise it might not have been done. This is Veronica Randolin. She was the property manager for Gulf Point at the time, and I worked with her to get the marker put up. This is a family picture there. And this is us with Jesse Voss's grandson, Bobby Walls, and the little girl in the front with the pink jacket on. She's actually named after her grandmother, Joffrey Walls. So this presentation is dedicated to Isaac and Sarah Harmon, Jesse and Joffrey Voss, and Harry C. Burton, and Denelda Burton. And I would like to dedicate this presentation to the memory of those power couples, Isaac Harmon, Jesse and Joffrey Voss, and Denelda and Harry Burton, who had the vision for this former great American cultural institution called Rosedale Beach, and for all of those many family members, individuals, politicians, state of Delaware officials, members of the press, the WBOC television station, and the list goes on, who made it possible for us to keep the memory of Rosedale Beach alive for future generations to come. And I would also like to extend a very special thank you and heartfelt warmth and love to the state of Delaware, Zwaanendael Museum family, including the Office of Historical and Cultural Affairs, Site Supervisor Bridget Warner for presenting this program and for inviting me to speak on one of my favorite subjects. I also want to thank Devin Felicia, I hope I got that right, the lead interpreter, for bearing with me during a Zoom presentation practice. I was very humbled and honored by the invitation to come home. And that's the end of my presentation.
Tamara, as usual, that was an awesome presentation. There is a comment here from an Amanda. She says, I'm so glad your dad is around to see the culmination of your work, inspired by his stories. The oral history is so important. This was a great presentation. Thanks. And that's a great segue into something that we are in the midst of doing. Because of the Rosedale Beach project and because of the segregated sands exhibit that we have online with our museum, we are also trying to promote an oral history. If anyone out there is interested in giving a history of their beach experiences in Delaware during the Jim Crow era, or if you know of anyone, please give us a call. We'd love to hear your stories if you're willing to tell them. We are trying to work on a ongoing project of oral histories. Tamara understands the importance of the oral history with her father's experiences. Let's see, there's a question here. When did you say Rosedale was sold and to whom? This is from Denise.
1983, it was sold to Gold Point.
I have a question for you. The resort that was on the Chesapeake where was that? Was that on this side of the shore, or was it on the opposite side?
I believe it was on the opposite side.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't know a lot about it. I have to do some more research, but I believe it was on the opposite side, yeah, on the Maryland side.
Okay. Lynn says, great presentation of a very successful project. Thank you for your efforts to tell this story of Delaware's history.
Wow, thank you. Someone said this would make a great movie.
Yeah, that's Trina. Trina Brown Hicks is going to speak at our Chautauqua event, and so is Tamara. Trina is going to talk about the Happy Day Club. I believe I got that right, Trina. And Tamara is going to speak again about Rosedale Beach. And our Chautauqua will be on the 8th and 9th of September. We hope everybody can join us. That one's going to be live. So we're going to hope you're outside in a tent, barring any kind of tropical storm or hurricane, which can happen in September.
Oh, hopefully not.
Somebody said this would make a great movie. That was Trina. Nancy says that was a very engaging presentation. Thank you. It amazes me that so many well-known performers were right here in Delaware.
Yeah.
A lot of them were part of the Chitlin circuit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yes, they were.
Denise says very eye-opening. Get a few more questions if anybody has any more. If you're like me, it takes me a few minutes to type, so I don't want to just go off the air if anybody has any more questions. Tamara, that was very good. I always get interested in that program. I think that would have been so cool to actually go and listen to some of those performers.
Yes, it would. Maybe one day. I wanted to say something about, you said about the Chitlin circuit. And see, I don't know if you all are familiar with the Green Book. You know the movie, The Green Book? I had never heard of the Green Book, honestly, because in my family, in my community, we knew about the Chitlin circuit. So when that movie came out, they actually came through Delaware, and I believe some of the history of Rosedale Beach was researched for it. But I had never heard of the Green Book before. I had never heard of it, and everything was word of mouth. Everything was word of mouth. So that was a good point to bring up.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Green Book was actually a travel guide put out by a gentleman named Green, and it actually listed places where people of color could travel safely during the Jim Crow era and not be hassled. And
yeah,
sad but true, but that's the way it was. All right, well, I don't see any more questions. Tamara, again, thank you. And our audience, everybody who's still on, thank you for coming out to our Zoom, for joining us in this Zoom presentation. And I wish everybody a happy and lovely weekend. It's beautiful. I think it's supposed to be beautiful all weekend. So enjoy your Juneteenth celebrations. And Tamara, we will see you again in September.
Yes, you will. Thank you so much for having me.